All right, let's record this. All right, everybody. We'll just start right away. Hope you had a good weekend, a good Shabbos. It's Monday here in America. Well, at least we have a long weekend, I guess. I don't know. The rabbi's job never stops. So there's no such thing as a long weekend. Okay, today is the Parsha class. The Parsha of Matos Maasei, which is a double Torah reading, and it's the longest Torah reading of the year, the longest double portion reading of the year. And it's Parshas Chazak, and it's Parshas Rosh Chodesh. Chazak means we're ending one of the books of Moses. Yeah, there are 5 books of Moses, Chamishi Chumshei Torah, and we're finishing off the book of Bamidbar, and we end off the congregation ends off saying, when they finish the last word, Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, everybody screams it out, followed by the Bal Kaira, the one who reads the Torah. He says, Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, may we continue, strength, maybe we be strengthened, that we should continue on the words of Torah, and guidance for the next coming weeks, the next book. We should have a lot of strength to be able to do that. Plus, it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh of Menachem of. Menachem of is the time of sadness. It's the saddest day of the Jewish people, which we have, Tisha B'Av, which begins on Rosh Chodesh of. It's called the 9 days. But we know when Mashiach comes, it will be turned into joy. There will be joyous times. So anyway, called Menachem of. May God give us comfort, and forget comfort. We want Mashiach now. We want the real thing. We're done with all this. Actually, we're going to speak about a few things in this week's Parsha. One of them has to do with turning darkness into light. We're going to talk about this week's Parsha. We learn about koshering things, how to make things kosher. Mikvah, why do we dip things in a mikvah? We learn about Gehenim, hell. What is that all about? We learned some of that from this week's Parsha. Maris Ayin, we'll talk about. Things have to appear proper. It's not enough just between you and God. Other people have to see it as being proper. And we'll talk about Nidarim. In fact, that's what we'll talk about. And we'll jump right in. The Parsha opens up about Nidarim. Nidarim means vows. A person can make a vow saying, I don't want to smoke cigarettes anymore. Okay, then you can't do that. You're not allowed to smoke cigarettes anymore. If you violate that, then you have to bring a korban. You have to bring a sacrifice. It's more than that. It's actually more severe. If you break a neder, what's called a vow, it's big problems. Even spiritually, there's a big problem. However, to be mafir a neder, how do you the removal of a nullification of a vow is pretty simple. There are multiple ways of doing it. If a wife makes a vow, says the Torah, her husband hears it, within 24 hours, he can nullify it for her. Now, the person who wants to be mafir the neder, he wants to remove this. Mafir means like to remove, do away with, batal, nullify the vow. Sorry, sometimes I have to translate. Takes a while to find the word in English. If he wants to get rid of the vow, he has to have a good reason, and you need 3 people. A bezdin, a Jewish court is consistent of 3 people, 2 of whom can be regular people. They just have to be, what's the word? They have to be eligible to be Adim, to be witnesses. To be a witness, you have to be 20 years old, a male, and observant of Judaism. Now, and the 3rd person has to be knowledgeable in a vow. I remember one time I was in a bookstore in Jerusalem, and it was when I didn't know so much, especially I didn't know about vows. And a woman comes up to my friend and I and said, I need to, she said to us in Hebrew, we need to get rid of a vow. I need to remove a vow. So I didn't speak Hebrew. So my friend did, and he walked over there. He followed her into the corner of a bookstore where she found 2 other rabbis. And right then and there, she said, I took a vow not to eat Munster cheese, and now I want to eat Munster cheese. I'm just kidding. I don't know what the vow was about, but they did it. And it doesn't have to be in a court. It could just be in the corner of a bookstore, Tuesday afternoon, on a hot day. It was a very hot day that day. So that talks about Nidarim in the beginning, about vows. Unlike a Shavua, by the way, a Shavua is an oath. A Shavua is more severe. We won't talk about that because that's in a different Parsha, but vows and oaths have different things. They have an oath, a vow has to do with a person, just a very simply, and an oath more has to do with an object. A vow has to do with an object, more on an object, and a Shavua, oath, has to do with a person. It more falls on the person. Now, let's move on to the Parsha. Parsha continues. Oh, and it talks about Midian. Remember Midian? Midian was the fight that we had, the Midianite ladies. What happened? Let's go back a few Parshas. Balak and the Midianites are nervous. The Jewish people are coming and they're wreaking havoc. They're going to destroy us. God is on their side. So he goes to Bilam, the sorcerer. Bilam is able to talk to God and Bilam says, look, I'll do my best, but I can only do whatever God wants. And he tries to convince God to curse the Jewish people. And God says no. So Balak is upset with Bilam, like, I paid you all this money and he didn't deliver on the goods. So Bilam says, okay, I'm going back home, but I'll tell you a little trick. God hates immorality. Get your ladies, your women, to go and seduce the Jewish men. And that'll be an opportune time. God will be upset. That'll be an opportune time to kill the Jewish men. And that's what ends up happening. 14,000 Jews end up being killed. Until Pinchas stands up because he sees the leader of the tribe of Shimon, Zimri, doing something inappropriate, and he kills Zimri and the lady Kuzbi, and all good. Remember, they wanted to kill Pinchas afterwards. The tribe of Shimon said, "Hey, what are you doing? You killed one of our guys." And Moses steps in and says, "No, you did the right thing." Now, great. God says to Moshe, I want you to take revenge upon these Midianites. The ladies ran away and the Midianite people ran away after, right? All the women basically made it out because the Jewish people were trying to do, hazard control over here. There was trying to get their own people to come back. So God says, I want you to go take a revenge. Go back to Midian and kill everybody. And Rashi says over here that there is a war and it's led by Pinchas. He leads the war. He leads the battle, and it says it kills Bilam. Rashi says over here they kill Bilam. The sorcerer gets killed in there, and Moses gets mad. 3 times in the Torah does Moses get mad. Why did Moses get mad? Because what happened? The Jewish men did not kill the Jewish women, and they were supposed to. And this happens. This kind of repeats itself. When we fought Amalek, we were supposed to kill Amalek himself, the people, the king of Amalek, and we didn't, and whatever. It's a whole bunch of problems. We don't follow through in everything we say we're going to do. Moses gets mad, and he forgets a law. What's the law over here? What happens is when a person wins a war, there's spoils of the war. And we know the famous line, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. It's not true. It's not always true, but we did. One of the spoils that we wanted to take were the pots and pans. I don't know why we decided to take pots and pans, but maybe they have very nice pots and pans from Japan or something like that. And they have to kosher them. They weren't used for kosher food. So they came to Moshe and they said, how do we make these pots and pans kosher? They cooked treif with it. They cooked pork in it or cheeseburgers, whatever it was. Moshe said, I forgot. I don't remember. He doesn't remember because he got angry. When you get angry, you forget. You lose your cool. You lose your mind. You're not called a bar das, menuchas hadas, as we say. You don't have a settled mind. You need to be in the right state of mind to really give advice to somebody. So he forgot, and he said, go to Elazar the Kohen. Rashi says they go to Elazar the Kohen, or in the Torah it says, go to Elazar the Kohen. And Elazar says like this. He says you have to purge them with fire. Purge them with fire. And I want to just talk a little bit about koshering really quickly right now. So when a rabbi becomes a rabbi, let me just make sure this is working. Yeah. When a rabbi becomes a rabbi, what do we study? We study the daily routine that we talk about in our halacha class, right? In our halacha class, we're learning about the daily routine, how to wake up in the morning, how to tie your shoes, how to eat, how to do all these different things. The next step is learning kashrus, kosher. It's called Yoredeya. So the first part of the Shulchan Aruch of the Jewish law is called Orach Chaim, the way of life, like daily routine. And then if you want to get smicha, if you want to become a rabbi, the next step is Yoredeya. And basically we spend most of our time learning what makes something kosher, something not kosher, more of like what makes something not kosher. And how to kosher things. If something becomes not kosher, like a pot or a pan, what do you do about it? So I'm not going to go through all that. Obviously, it took me like two and a half years. But one of the things, just a principle, is that however something became not kosher is how it becomes kosher once again. So let's say you're boiling a pot of water and you drop a piece of non-kosher food falls inside. So the pot is not kosher. A very simple level. The pot is not kosher. How do you make it kosher? Well, you got to spill the water out. You got to clean it. And then you got to wait 24 hours. And then it's still not done. The main thing you got to do is you got to boil it again. You put some hot water in there and you boil it till it overflows. In other words, it became not kosher. Kach boila, boileya. How it swallowed, how it consumed, how it became not kosher is the same way. Kach poilet is how you. I'm not saying the correct language. I don't. But kach poilet, pollute. Yeah, that's how it spits back out. That's how you get it back out. So because it became not kosher with water, boiling water. So you have to boil water and it'll expunge it, so to speak. So like an oven, for example. What about an oven? I put something not kosher in an oven. Oven is with fire. So the same thing. You have to use a blowtorch to get it out. It has, because it became not kosher through fire, it has to become not kosher. It becomes kosher once again through fire. Self-cleaning ovens, by the way, work very well. You just gotta wait 24 hours and then keep self-cleaning ovens get hot enough to get to like 2,000 degrees. It has to be for at least 24 hours. 24 hours. 2.5 hours of cleaning and it'll become kosher. So here we have this concept. Elazar the Kohen says, you know how you make these pans kosher? These pans that were put on fire, put them on fire and make it happen. So then what happens over here? Let's just move on. Okay. Gad and Reuven. So now the Torah is we're getting ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. We're getting ready to go into Israel. And remember what we spoke about Slavchad's daughters, how they wanted their portion of the land of Israel, because God is now going to, actually in last week's Parsha, they talked about whose portion, how the land is going to be divided. Sorry, it's in this week's Parsha. What am I talking about? Last week in this week's Parsha, how the land will be divided. Now, Gad and Reuven were the best soldiers, the strongest, the mightiest, and they had the most cattle. Can you imagine? There's 3 million people traveling. There's 3 million of us, right? Not 600,000. 600,000 between the ages of 20 and 60. But there were 3 million. The tradition tells us there were about 3 million people. Now, how many cattle were there? There were probably like 10 million livestock, and it took a long time to travel. Anyway, so Gad and Reuven, they fought Bashan last week, or a few weeks ago. They fought Bashan. Yeah, Og, the king Og, the giant, didn't allow us to go. We wanted safe passage into Israel. God didn't need us to fight those who lived on the border of Israel. We had to fight those that lived inside the land of Israel. So on the border, we said, hey, do you mind if we just pass through you? We're not here to fight. In fact, we'll even buy some of your merchandise. We'll be tourists and buy what you need. And they said no, and not only that, we're going to kill you. So we had to go into battle. We fought Bashan, and now Bashan was on the western bank, so to speak, of Jordan, not today's West Bank Jordan, but much further out. And it was very good grazing. It was very good grass. There was a lot of grass, and it was very good for grazing. And Gad and Reuven said, will be plenty of land for our cattle. So they asked Moshe, can we settle here? We don't necessarily want to go into Israel. We want to stay here. Moshe didn't get angry, but he was alarmed and he exclaimed, "How dare you? Your people are going to fight." Let's look at that. Let's see what he said. Basically, Moshe said it's inconceivable that your brothers should go into battle and you remain here in peace and tranquility. So, and then Moshe says, "You're spies. You're like the Meraglim. You're like the spies, the 12 spies that basically ruined everything for everybody." Why? Because you are the strongest army, and you're basically saying, "I don't want to go in." The people are going to fear. They're going to think, if Gad and Reuven, the tribes of Gad and Reuven, don't want to go in, there's no way we're going to win. They must see something. They're strategists. They must see something that we don't see. And so Moshe says like this, though. I'll ask God, if it's good in the eyes of God and good in the eyes of the people, then we can do it. And they say like this. They say, look, when you go to God, tell him that we're going to go into Israel and we will fight. So we'll fight and then we'll wait for everyone to settle and get their land and everything like that. And then we'll come back. By the way, anyway, they go and they tell God, and God says, yes, that's fine. Just to talk about this really briefly, it took the Jewish people, what happened? Gad and Reuven left their people behind in Bashan. They left their families in Bashan, and then they went into Eretz Yisrael with the Jewish people. And they took them 7 years to fight, and then it took another 7 years to settle. That means for 14 years, they didn't see their families. And the Gemara talks about when they came back, when the tribes came back, when the tribe of Gad and Reuven came back, they didn't recognize their own family. Now, they didn't say it was a bad thing, but the Gemara mentions it, that, look at the consequence of something that they basically, look at the consequence of something they did. They didn't even recognize their own children. The children didn't recognize them. They didn't even know how to really function within the family anymore. You can imagine it wasn't exactly good for Shalom Bayis. It wasn't such a good thing. You got to come home once in a while, you know what I mean? So they do that. Now, I want a special diak in this lashon, a special language, something interesting about here. It says it should be good in the eyes of God and good in the eyes of the people. Why the people? Typically, we don't care about what other people say. In fact, the first law in Shulchan Aruch says, do not be embarrassed before the maligim, before those who scoff you. That's the first law in Judaism, because we do things differently. We look differently, we act differently, we dress differently. And therefore, there's bound to be scoffers, people who don't understand. So therefore, we don't mind them. So then why does Moshe say, as long as it's good in the eyes of God and in the eyes of people? And here we learn a very powerful halacha, and it's called maris ayin. Maris ayin means it has to look proper in the eye. For example, Shulchan Aruch, Jewish law talks about, let's say you want to have a coffee, and you're having coffee with your steak. So you can have coffee with steak, but you can have milk from a cow or from a goat. You can't have milk from an animal with a steak. But let's say the Gemara talks about, what if you have almond milk, and the almonds, milk from almonds, it actually says now everyone has almond milk, but they've been doing it for 2,500 years. Shkedin, almond milk. You should have some almonds on the table so that people know that the milk inside of the coffee is almond milk, and almond milk is okay, or non-dairy cream is some sort of non-dairy cream. I've had many. I remember when I was a little kid, I went with a rabbi to New York City, and we went into Starbucks, and I thought we walked into Starbucks, and in Starbucks, at least at the time, you're able to get a black coffee, no problem. It wasn't a problem of kosher because of the way they make the coffee and the way they clean the pots and they do all these different things. But I assumed that everything in the store was kosher. He didn't tell me that, I thought it was a kosher Starbucks. I was in New York City. I didn't grow up in New York City. I thought, cool. So I started buying all this food. Turns around, he's like, what are you doing? I said, I thought everything was kosher. And he said, oh, I should have told you. Anyway, that's a problem of Maras Ayin. Yeah, someone's always watching, by the way. You got a yarmulke on your head, and it never ends. Like, you always got to be ready to go. I yesterday I have a friend who's a boxing promoter, and he was interviewing one of the guys with a big fight, and he asked him, what about your training camp? How's training camp going? Because he's got a big fight coming. And he said, I'm always ready. I don't really train. I don't have training camp because I'm always ready. I'm always ready to fight. I don't take a break. If I take a break, then I have to prepare and I have to go through training again. I'm just always going. And that's the same thing. Something to do with I don't even know how I got into that. But a Jew is always ready to go. We don't have to. You get the idea. I apologize. I don't know why. Why did I say that? Not even sure. Anyway, Mara signs. We learn about Mara sign from here. Just moving on in the Chumash. We move on to the next Parsha. Second Parsha. It's called Maasei. Matos Maasei. Maasei means the journeys. These are the journeys of the Jewish people when they left Egypt. There were 42 journeys. Famous line from the Alter Rebbe, from Torah Or, from Chassidus. It says there are 42 journeys in a person's life. And interestingly enough, which I'll get into a little bit later after I finish through the overview of the whole Parsha, and we'll go into this a little bit. But what is the 42 journeys of life? I'll talk about. I'll go back to that. It's fine. Then we get marching orders. Look over here. We get marching orders from God. What do we do when we get to the land of Israel? So we have to go drive out all the pagans, kill all their idols. And then they talk about the borders of the land of Israel and how things are going to be divided. Now, interestingly enough, sure, if you remember, we spoke about everybody had a portion of the land of Israel except for the Leviim from the tribe of Levi. They did not. They got 48 cities. 6 of those 48 cities were set aside for what's called an Ari Miklat. If a person kills somebody unintentionally, they're allowed to run to an Ari Miklat, a city of refuge, and the family is not allowed, of the victim, is not allowed to take revenge. It was unintentional. It was manslaughter. So you can run to these Ari Miklats, and it said there were signs on roads everywhere on how to get to Ari Miklat. They had special roads. Maybe you don't want to take that road. People will know to cut you off. But there were special roads, and they would take those roads, and there would be signs, and they would bring you to 6 cities. They would hang out there. And they would just blend in. They would be part of the people. Nobody would ask about what's going on over there. The Leviim, the cities of the Leviim, of the Levites, were very warm cities, and the people were very warm, and they were very, they took you in. They treated you right. Now, spiritually speaking, just very briefly, what does that mean in Ari Miklat? In other words, why did the person need to do this? So, in other words, why is there like a city of refuge? Why did you? What's happening over here? Why did God, so to speak, just go through like a regular process, like a court process, and let it be absolved, and everything's fine, and the person moves on with his life? So the Torah is trying to speak out over, like, give you an opportunity here and trying to point something out to you. God's saying like this: if a person kills with manslaughter, via manslaughter, there's some sort of spiritual pagam, some sort of spiritual blemish inside of that person. There's something that a person needs to work on in himself. Look, truly, I don't understand this completely. A person truly unintentionally kills somebody. That's not really beyond their control. Could you really say, can I really see how it's a problem and it's a pagam in the soul? I don't know. But nevertheless, spiritually speaking, that the Torah is trying to give you time to reflect. That what God is saying is, go to these Ari Miklat, these Ari Miklatim, these cities of refuge, and reflect. Reflect on your life, reflect on yourself. It's a city of refuge. And in our lives, spiritually speaking, there has to be time when you take refuge. You have to take refuge. That sometimes we're just going. You need to have a moment in your day that's a refuge, a place of refuge, that you think, what am I doing? Am I acting the proper way? Is there something? How do I get back on the right road and return back to my city? Like a little really cute idea. I just want to mention that there were really 9 cities of refuge. God told Moshe they should set up 9 cities of refuge. And there will be 9 cities of refuge. God says, promises there are going to be 9. When the Jewish people, throughout the entire reign of the Jewish people, we only had 6. The last 3, Keni, Knizi, Vikadmoini, the 3, those are the things. Say that as a tongue twister. They are waiting for us when Mashiach comes. So that's one of the promises that we know. This is one of the places we know that Mashiach is going to come, because we only ever had God promised us, and we had prophets that came and said God will tell us that, and we've only ever had 6. So we're waiting for the 3 more. Kinesi, if you had money. The question is, why will we need cities of refuge when Mashiach comes? So we're going to see everything in a way, spiritually speaking. Yeah, there's not just, it's not cities of refuge. We gave I had a little foretaste of it, but cities of refuge is not just where a person kills somebody physically, Chas v'shalom, God forbid, but even spiritually speaking, it's a place for growth. It's a space for growth and proper intention, the alignment. And that's we'll still need that when Mashiach comes, because we're trying to get closer to God, trying to get closer to who we are, our truest essence. So let's get more of those. We can have more of those places. Why not? Moving on. Okay, so we spoke about talks over here again about the daughters of Tzlofchad. Remember, these daughters, they keep coming back in the Parsha. Tzlofchad's daughters come from the tribe of Manasseh. And what's the story? Very briefly, their father was killed, and they had no brothers. And the Torah says, in order to inherit, who gets land in the land of Israel? A male. The male will get the land. As long as you have a father or a brother, they get a portion of the land of Israel. Now, the Tzlofchad daughters were big Zionists, and they said, we want a portion of the land of Israel. And the Torah actually calls them very, very bright, very intelligent women. And they had a strong zest. They loved the land of Israel. True Zionists, in the true sense of a Zionist. So God said, fine, yeah, it's good. They spoke well. They will get a portion of the land of Israel. Now, we spoke about inheritance, and I just want to touch upon that again. Now, inheritance only works through the sons. Daughters can't inherit. That we don't know the reason for that. That's a chok. That's not a logical thing. You might think you have some sort of, man and women's man's world. No, Torah doesn't talk like that. For whatever reason, there is men only inherit. Now, the rabbis, very often, the sages, will make these loopholes, so to speak. And they say, okay, it's not proper that a daughter doesn't inherit. So what you do is, when you make a will, you should write the will a certain way that they will be gifted. These girls will be gifted. Everyone should get the inheritance, not as an inheritance, what's called a Yerusha, but as a gift, as a matana. And it should be written down in a specific way so that everybody gets a portion. Now you might think, these loopholes aren't a good idea. No, the Torah very much encourages loopholes. We're not always trying to make things difficult for ourselves. That's not, we have a goal and we need to achieve it, and we need to achieve it within the realm of Torah, because when you do it within the realm of Torah, then you have God. You're working within divinity, so to speak. So God allows these opportunities for these loopholes still within his world of divinity. So there are certain times, especially with certain laws, that we highly encourage. The Jewish people, even since the times of Moses, have encouraged loopholes. There are certain loopholes I'm going to do, and here is one of them. When it comes to the laws of inheritance, try not to work within inheritance. We don't want to deal with inheritance. Work within gifts. Yeah, people try to avoid probate. Probate, at least that's here in America. Yeah, if you didn't file your will properly or whatnot, you want to avoid probate. Same thing over here. A person should have a will, and the Torah says like this. The Torah also says, the sages say, you can't fully trust your children. When money comes into play, even if you trust your children, okay, your children are married into other people, the in-laws, sons-in-laws and daughters-in-laws. So when money comes in, it causes a lot of problems. The Torah says, let's set it up in a way you want contracts. Jews love contracts. Judaism very much promotes contracts, especially when times are good. That's the best time to make a contract. Marriage is with a contract. Buying a house is with a contract. Lots of things are with contracts. Very much encourages contracts to be written properly and try to make everyone happy if you can. So it moves over here about inheritance. So now what happens is, it says in the Parsha over here that Manasseh, the tribe of Manasseh, got upset. Who's the tribe of Manasseh? The daughters of Tzlofchad come from the tribe of Manasseh. Now these daughters are going to marry somebody. What if they marry somebody from the tribe of Binyamin or Yisachar? What's going to happen? The husband is going to inherit the land. That husband is going to now, that portion within the tribe of Manasseh is going to be in the hands of another tribe, so to speak. And nowadays we don't, for different reasons, we don't care so much. For good reasons, right? And then we ended up mixing tribes later on. But at the time, it was a big deal. Land is very important because it's an agricultural, there's a land of agriculture. We relied on the crops that we made and everything like that. So they wanted the land, as much land as they could, to sustain their own tribe. So God said like this, very interesting. God said, the tribe, the land of Slavchad, whoever they marry, whether they, no, sorry, that's not what he said. God said they can only marry within their tribe. And that's what happened for many, many years until whatever, Binyamin. We'll get to a story much later on at some other point when there was a big fight between tribes, and whatever, the tribe of Binyamin didn't do what they were, or tribe of Dan didn't do what they were supposed to do, or Binyamin, sorry, and they didn't do what they do. And God, eventually they said, let's everyone mix, all the tribes can mix together, which fits very well, by the way. I'm just thinking right now. Following Tisha B'Av is one of the happiest days in the Jewish calendar. It's called Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av is when all the women would dress up in the same clothing. It's not like this anymore, but they would dress up in the same clothing. The men would dress up in the same clothing, and they would all go to a field. All the eligible bachelors and bachelorettes would go to a field, and they would all wear the same clothing, so you couldn't tell who was wealthier than the next or who came from who. You're just looking at the soul, so to speak, the soul of the person, the character of the person, and they would ask to dance. They would ask the other person to dance, and they would find shidduchim. They would get they would find matches that way. That's on Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av, which also is the day when the day. Another reason why it's so happy is because the last when we sinned with the 12 spies, it said that whole generation will die out, and it was on Tu B'Av that everyone stopped dying. That was supposed to not make it in. So there's a lot of joy in that day. Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, every 15th of the month, by the way, is a full moon. And when King Solomon was king, so there was a full moon all the time. I don't know how the oceans handled that or how that affected crops and fishing and whatnot, but that's the reality. That's what happened. It's a time of joy. It's a time of peace and tranquility. Let's move on over here. Okay, so let's go back over here. What does it mean that, what does it mean how to kosher something? Let me go back to this. It says that when the Jewish people got the plates and the pots and the pans, the Elazar said you should put it in megnida. You should put it in a mikvah, water. You should put it in water. You should take a mikvah. A mikvah is a place where a person goes if they need to purify themselves. There are different laws of mikvahs. You can build a mikvah. The ocean is a natural mikvah. A lake is a natural mikvah. A spring is a natural, and there are famous mikvahs. Most famous probably is the one of the Arizal in the city of Tzfas. It's very, very cold. It's a spring from the water. They don't know the source of this. I don't know. They didn't dig, or they don't know the source of where the spring comes up. But I can tell you it's very, very cold. I've been to that mikvah many times. You go to a mikvah. Actually, we're building a mikvah in our shul right now. A new one. When we get new kalim, when we buy new pots and pans from a non-Jew, we have to put them in a mikvah. Why do we have to make them holy? What the Torah is teaching us over here is something about eating. How do you properly eat? Food is not a joke. We don't mess around with food. Food becomes part of who you are. So therefore, you have to be very careful with what you consume. You are what you eat. The Torah believes that. It becomes your flesh. That's why non-kosher food doesn't allow for your soul to express itself. Because what happens is you eat food, there's a spiritual component of the food and a physical component of the food. The physical body is there to serve the soul. The physical part of the food is there to service the divine spark that's found inside. What happens is with kosher food, that divine, non-kosher food, that divine spark can't be released. Now, dipping it into a mikvah, putting our kelim into mikvah, our vessels into the mikvah, kelim means vessels. Putting our vessels into a mikvah is reminding us that we eat in a different way. We don't eat just for the sake of pleasure. We eat to sustain ourselves. We eat just enough to sustain ourselves. At least we try to. It's not very easy, but we try to eat enough just to sustain ourselves, to allow our soul to express itself. The soul can't express itself if the body is unhealthy. So therefore, we have to eat healthy. You don't overeat. The Rambam says, we'll get into those laws. You can't overeat. You have to eat certain types of food because it's only there to serve the soul. The body is there to serve the soul, and the body itself is healthy. And the body, in fact, what's one of the reasons why you're not allowed to get a tattoo? You're not allowed to desecrate the body because the body doesn't belong to you. The body is lent to you. You're a soul. That's who you are. So in order to come down to this world to fulfill your mission, which is what you want to do, right? God, we spoke about earlier, God speaks we spoke about Adam and Eve, what the depth of the story, what's really going on. It's kind of a bizarre story, but we know that God spoke to the souls before they came down and said, I have a mission for you. And do you want to do this mission? And the soul says, yes. And then it comes down to a physical body. The body doesn't belong to you. You're a soul. So the soul is lent to you. So therefore you have to take care of the body. That's part of our goal. The body is a car. You got to you take care of it, it takes care of you. So you have to eat the proper food. We don't mess around. So by dipping, again, everything when it comes to eating food is very special. And it's not only, I'm not only trying to scare you, but if you eat the proper food by saying, the Zohar says, by eating food, making a blessing over it. Let's say you eat food why do we always eat food on a special day? Because it says, when you make a bracha on the food, the divine energy of the day becomes infused into the food. Bracha means to be mamshech, to be drawn down. It draws down the energy of the day into the food. Now you consume the food. Then the food becomes part of you. So the energy of the day, Pesach, the Passover part of the day, is now infused in the food, and now you consume it. You're now a walking, talking piece of Pesach, so to speak. You've elevated not only your soul, but you've elevated your body. So food is we take food very seriously. Try not to overeat, and we're very careful what we put in our mouth. Very careful what we put in our mouth. So that's something about food. Just moving on. Let's see over here. What else did we talk about? Oh, I just want to say, it just reminded me. It was a Hasidic story. It's a real story. It actually happened. There was a guy. There was a chassid. There was a yeshiva bacher, a young man in yeshiva. And he would daven, he would pray for very long periods of time. And he would daven, and he would daven with sweetness and ariches, it was very long and beautiful. Then it would come time for him to eat breakfast, and he would take a nap. He'd fall asleep. And he would miss the first part of Seder, which was Gemara, Talmud. You have to learn Talmud. Yeah, so the Seder, the order of yeshiva was, you'd wake up in the morning, you would learn. Then there would be davening, prayer. And then you would get breakfast, and then you would go and you would continue with your studies, Talmud. But he would always sleep in. He'd always fall asleep. So one of the teachers in the yeshiva went to the previous Rebbe, who was in charge of the yeshiva, and Tomchet Mimin, Lubavitch, said, what should we do about this kid? The Rebbe said, the problem what he's doing is he thinks eating is not part, he thinks that he just eats to eat. But he should see it as a service to God. Eating is, going to the bathroom and eating and sleeping is all part of your service to God. You eat with the proper intention. Why am I eating? I'm eating here to serve God. I should have energy. I should be joyful. Be able to learn Torah, do mitzvahs, help another person, on a very chlalistic level. Sleeping, why do you sleep? You sleep because you need energy. You need to be able to do things with vigor, chayas, serving God. Going to the bathroom. Again, you think these are mundane. Oh, it's not a pause. It's part of the service to God. Just remember that story. Just came to my mind. Now, okay, let's talk a little bit about koshering. What is koshering? Koshering something on when koshering something, it removes all of the negative traits, the negative elements. So the Zohar says like this. The Zohar says the way we kosher something, make something kosher is by purging. You've heard of purgatory? There are certain things in the human body, there's certain things that we do in our life. What happens is when you speak or you make a certain action, and if it's something incorrect, you speak lashon hara, you speak gossip, or you speak negatively about somebody else, you do a negative action, these are expressions of our soul. You're expressing your soul. Now you're expressing your soul in a negative way, and it affects the soul, and it actually leaves a blemish on the soul, so to speak, as we spoke about many times, called klipa. Klipa is like shmutz. Klipa is those things which are against godliness. We don't believe in. There's nothing outside of God. These are part of God's creation, but they block, so to speak, godliness. What happens is a person has to go through some sort of, when the soul comes back, the soul came down to the body, it was pure. It didn't have any klipa attached to it. Didn't have anything which was against the expression of godliness, so to speak. Only through this world can that possibly happen. So now when the soul goes back up to its source, which we'll speak about what all that means at a different time, it has to come back pure. It has to come back the way it was, at the very least. So it has to go through a process called purging, called Gehenim. Gehenim is usually translated as hell, which fine. But whatever your concept of hell is, forget all the movies and whatever garbage you've filled it up with and whatever you think and whatever proofs you could possibly bring. It's all, I promise you, it's completely wrong. What Gehenim means like a purging. It purges the soul of these issues. It needs to purify the soul. Now, it says even the worst Jew who's done everything else spends no more than 11 months in this purgatory. And there are different types of purgatory, so to speak. Just like I explained earlier, there's the boiling water, so to speak, very, very hot, because it was a big problem. It really got into the walls, to the body, to the soul. It really got into the walls of the vessel. In our case, our body, our soul. So therefore, you got to do it the same way. Even intentional sins, those are like the intentional sins. Intentionals mean you knew exactly what you were doing, and you know that it was wrong, and you went ahead and did it anyway. Not a person who doesn't know. It's called the Tinek Shenishba. Tinek Shenishba is a child who was taken captive. He's not held liable for going against God's will because he didn't know. God put him in a situation that he shouldn't know, and that was done by design. The same thing. But what if it's a person that does know and they go ahead and do it? Okay, so it makes a blemish on the soul, so to speak. So it needs to be removed. So it takes a little bit of a hotter, the temperature needs to be turned up a little bit to take it out. Now, these aren't physical. This is not physical. So there's no, the Torah says it's painful for the soul, but it's not pain like you and I experience pain, like it hurts. It's painful in the sense that it's an embarrassment for the soul. The soul feels embarrassed that it couldn't have an influence on the body. It's not the soul that's making a blemish. Its job is to influence the body, the animal soul. And it's embarrassed that it couldn't really convince the animal soul to live properly and do what it needs to do. So the embarrassment level is turned up, so to speak. And it says by very righteous people, everybody goes through some sort of Gehenim, so to speak. But some only go for a moment, some only go for 11 months at the most. Because anytime you have a connection to the physical world, it's going to make some sort of blemish on the body. Again, so clearly it's not a bad thing. There's nothing negative here. God's not trying to punish you or harm you in any way. That's why, by the way, we only say Kaddish when somebody passes away. We only say it for 11 months because the Kaddish helps the soul ascend and work through that part. It's good if you can't say Kaddish. It's good to get someone else to say Kaddish. If you're a woman, you get someone else to say Kaddish. I don't have to say Kaddish, but my grandfather passed away. My grandfather had a yard sale yesterday. I got somebody else to say Kaddish. My parents were in a place where they couldn't say Kaddish. I got somebody else to do it. It's very good. It's an elevation for the soul. So whatever you think of hell, throw it out the window. That's to hell with it. Tzaddikim, by the way, they go through. There's something called there's hot and there's also cold, like a cold purgatory. It's called Gehenim Shel Shelik, of snow. Some people don't need to go through. There's one opinion that says it's worse, but most opinions agree that Gehenim Shel Shelik is cold. It's like a cold. You have to go through like some little. I don't know what it is. Some sort of whatever cold represents on a spiritual plane. I have to look it up in the Zohar. I forgot. I don't even know if I really learned it. We'll look it up. But anyway, you can see that some of these things can be brief moments of Gehenim. Just going back through the Torah over here. Okay. Chibur Lekever. I don't have to get into that. Okay. Now, just something very interesting. It says these are the journeys of the Jewish people when they left Egypt. Let me ask you something. When you leave Egypt, it takes I don't know, it takes what, 1 minute? You just go through the border and that's the end of it. Why does it say these are the journeys of the Jewish people as they left Egypt? These are the journeys. As if it's continuing to move out. We're continuing to move out of Egypt. And that's exactly right. Egypt, we know, the word in Hebrew is Metzarim. Metzarim means boundaries. Those things which constrict you, hold you back from becoming who you really are. We have a mitzvah every single day. A person has to see himself as if he left Egypt every single day. And the Chabad, we know it's b'chol rega v'rega. Every moment, a person has to see himself as leaving Egypt. Now, journeys, what the Torah is trying to teach us over here is that leaving of Egypt is not a one-time. The point here is that it's not a one-time we did and that's the end of it. It's a constant battle. We're constantly leaving those things which hold us back from letting us become who we truly are meant to be and who we truly are, which is our soul. I just want to say, just to mention on that, the Torah doesn't require you to become somebody else. Unlike, you see in like these motivational videos, as my class always knows, motivational videos only make you want to watch more motivational videos. And I don't think they really move you. But they're always trying to say you can become somebody else. Look at this person, you can become that person. No, the Torah says all you're trying to do is reveal who you are at your core. And that is a constant, just like when you reach one level, says the Torah, it's very interesting. So the Zohar says, especially in Chassidus, you reach one level, then you can see your horizon moves much further out. Yeah, you walk to one place, now you can see further, which means you're never gonna get there. There's no such thing. You're always moving forward. Yeah, you reach the top of the mountain, and then you can now see, wow, there's a lot more to go. There's a lot more, in other words, other mountains to climb. Or you get to the end of the horizon of the ocean, then you see, wow, there's another horizon connected with on top of the ocean. It's constantly moving, and it's done like that by design. So therefore, you're constant, because you might get through one level. Yeah, you might break through one part of you, but there's another place to break through. And don't think that that's a problem. These are called journeys. They're all called journeys. Now, I always want to say something very interesting. Before the Jewish people got to Mount Sinai, they went to a place called Refidim. Refidim means a quarrel. Why? What happened? They asked over there, is God amongst us, right? There was no water. And they said, is God, Hashem bikarvenu? Is Hashem amongst us? Chutz ben yak. You just left Egypt, and you just left Egypt with all these miracles, and now you're going to go to Mount Sinai. You know what's going to happen, that God is going to reveal himself, and you're asking, is God amongst us? And that's the place, that's the preparatory place for receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. This is the place they go right before they go to Mount Sinai. Like, I don't know, I would think you want to move into more and more holy places until you reach the pinnacle. No, God says that's not how I set up life. You can be caught in the web of sin, says the Zohar. You can be caught in the web of sin, like Refidim. Look what happened to Refidim. God is not even here. Yeah, very often we'll have some great connection to God, and things will be going good. And then, boom, bad things. Something negative happens, so to speak. You make your own. Sometimes you did it yourself, or sometimes it was put upon you, and it could be, it could be catastrophic to a certain extent. Says God, that's also considered a journey. Refidim is part of the journeys. Just like Mount Sinai is considered part of the journeys, Refidim is part of the journeys. Because we have this concept in Torah called Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah. That whenever there's going to be a descent, there is going to be an ascent of equal or greater value. That's a fundamental concept in Torah. Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah. Just like when you want to throw a baseball, the farther you want to throw back a baseball, you can see me, you got to cock your hand farther back. The farther hand you put your hand, cock your hand back or your arm, the further the ball will get thrown. So the same thing over here. Those are all part of the journeys. The ups and the downs are all part of the journeys. In fact, they're opportunities, so to speak. Much like, say, the stock market. Yeah, you might think when the market goes down, oh no, you get scared and you want to get out. Well, really, that's actually the time to really double down, because you're gonna have there's gonna be an ascent. Whenever that happens, I don't know when that's gonna happen, but that will happen. So make sure you're prepared for that. So the same thing over here. That the journeys of life, sometimes we lodged for a long time, sometimes we were lodged for a short period of time, sometimes there were times of quarrel, times of joy and revelations. They're all considered part of leaving Egypt. That's all part of your journey, trying to get to where you need to be. I thought I wrote down something about from the Chayz of Lublin. Okay, whatever. That's what the Chayz of Lublin says. No, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I wrote like a note over here about the Chayz of Lublin, but I don't. Again, the Chayz of Lublin speaks about this idea of Yerit Tzorch. Now, I want to just end off over here about Matot. The word matot means a staff. And specifically, a staff made from an almond tree. That's the first word of our Parsha, Matot. The beginning, we're right now in the middle of the 3 weeks. The 3 weeks from when the walls of Jerusalem were breached. Right, last Sunday we had a fast day. Not this past Sunday, the Sunday before. Because that was the day that Moshe came down. He broke the luchos, he broke the tablets. A lot of tragic things happened that day. One of which were most notably, the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem, which culminated 3 weeks later in Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av and the 10th day of Av, which are the saddest days in the Jewish calendar, when the temple itself was destroyed. Both temples were destroyed. A lot of other tragic things happened. It's in the summer, yeah? I remember I had a teacher in yeshiva, a rabbi in yeshiva said, most of the world is getting ready for going to the beach. They're grabbing their beach balls and their beach blankets, and the Jewish people are beginning mourning. It's kind of like sad. I mean, he was joking about it, but there's truth. It's obviously true. And because we're coming into summer, and yet summer is a time of brightness and joy and everything like that, and you should take advantage of it. But like at the same time, the Jewish people, are getting like there's like 3 weeks of sadness over here. We don't get a haircut, as you can see. We don't have a haircut. We don't listen to music, live music, and starting Rosh Chodesh till the 9th of Av, we don't eat meat. Try not to if you can. We don't get new clothes. We don't have weddings. Seder. The question is, how do you combat nature? I mean, the summer. The summer is a time of pritzos, as we say. Like it's a time to be very strong in your Judaism and not get sucked into the desires of life. Yeah, the desires of life are out and about right now. So you have to says the Torah, you have to have what's called matot. You have to have a matot is a staff. A staff of an almond tree. What is a staff? A staff is removed from something which is removed from its source, much like we were when God destroyed the temple. We removed it of its source, so it became hard. Now you might think we've been cut off from our life source, but says the Torah, that's not exactly true. This is again this concept of Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah, the descent for the sake of an ascent. What happens? What's an almond tree? Specifically an almond tree. What's so special about an almond? It says an almond sprouts very quickly. It's called shkedim. Shaked means to be quick, to be diligent. An almond tree grows within 3 weeks. That's what it says. That it starts off as bitter. If you have an almond right away, when it starts sprouting, it's very bitter, but at the end it becomes very sweet. It says the Torah over here that there's two things. The Torah is saying this week's Parsha, why do we read it in the beginning of the 3 weeks? Because I'm telling you 2 things, says the Torah. You have to be like a staff. That you might think you're a staff. What's a staff? It's removed from its source. But I'm doing that to harden you, so to speak, to be prepared, to remain focused on what the mission is. You're going to go now into a tekufa. You're going to go now into a season where it's become very, so to speak, enticing, and it can take you off track. It can move you off track. So I need you to remain strong. If you remain strong, it'll be like the end. It'll be like the end of how a tree grows, how an almond tree grows. It's hard and it seems to be cut off and it's very bitter, but don't worry, it goes through it very quickly. I don't like to leave you in moments of sadness, and that's not, you're my child. That's not what I want. I want to move you to, the ultimate end will be with sweetness and joy, and that which will, as we see, ends with the culmination of Tu B'Av, which was considered the most joyous day of the year. So these things, these downfalls are really there for us to have a greater ascent as a result of the first Beis Hamikdash being destroyed, as a result of Moshe throwing down the tablets. And he had to write seemingly something so negative. If you saw, remember God said that was my greatest joy. But what ended up happening from that was we ended up having more Torah. God told Moses more Torah because of that, so we were able to get more Torah. The first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so we can have something even greater, the second Beis Hamikdash, the second temple, which had more, just all the same revelations, and it was much bigger and much larger, and it lasted longer. And that was destroyed, so we ultimately have the third one, which will last forever, and it'll be much larger and much greater, and everyone, all of the neshamas, all the souls will come back into the bodies, and we'll have joy together. So all these, the bitterness of galus, of exile, of seemingly being cut off, we don't see God, our Father in heaven, our divine provider. It's God said, don't worry. I make the ascent just as great as the descent. And I hope that it happens speedily in our days. We don't have to wait any longer. We're sick of this. We don't have no more Yeridas, no more Aliyahs, no more downs to ups. Let's just go and be the way it's supposed to be. May it happen right away. Anybody have any questions? There's more, but I think that'll be enough. Can we? Okay. Okay, everybody. This will be put up on our YouTube. Class tonight, 8 o'clock. Nobody has any questions? All right. I'll speak to you. See you guys.